This is CBC Vancouver News.
Tragedy on the water near Spanish Banks. A boat sinks, a body is found, and a search continues. Plus,
I've known him for 3 years, but it felt like a lifetime.
mystery surrounds a homicide investigation in Kelowna. A 15-year-old boy dies after being hit by a car believed to be connected to a bear spraying incident involving teens. And
there are too many unnecessary barriers for internationally trained professionals across the board that need to be removed.
the province's push to get more internationally trained professionals working in BC. How effective will the new legislation be? Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. We begin with tragedy off Vancouver's coastline. A man's body has been found and a boat has capsized partway between Wreck Beach and Spanish Banks.
Crews went down to the water, and the Coast Guard had already brought a deceased male, an identified male, up on shore. Crews did CPR to do the best they could. Unfortunately, the unidentified male had succumbed to his injuries and passed away.
Emergency responders received a distress call around 1:30 this afternoon. They confirmed just one person was aboard the vessel when it flipped over. The Canadian Coast Guard scoured the water for hours nearby, but the search was called off at sundown. The man who died has yet to be identified, and RCMP are now taking over the investigation. In Kelowna, a teen has been killed, and mystery surrounds what is now considered a homicide investigation. It happened over the weekend after some sort of bear spraying incident involving a group of teens. It was in the neighborhood of Rutland. Kelowna RCMP were called to Ben Lee Park around 4 p.m. While they were responding, officers also received reports of a young man struck by a car nearby. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but later died. Investigators believe he was connected somehow with the earlier bear spray incident, but won't reveal how exactly. Today at the scene, a memorial has grown in memory of the teen. He's being identified by loved ones as 15-year-old Tristan Seeger. We spoke with the teen at the park who says he was a close friend.
I've known him for 3 years, but it felt like a lifetime.
Yeah.
He was 15, and he lived 3 lifetimes in the 15 years he was alive, but he should have lived way more lifetimes than that.
The mother of the boy says the reality of what happened is still surreal. She ultimately wants rumors put to rest and the facts of what happened to come to light.
That I want this to be a really clean case. I don't want any retribution. I want people who know something to go to the police. I don't want social media gossip, and I don't want threats and bravado. Like, I want this person or people brought to justice, and I want it done the right way.
As for the investigation, no arrests have been made, and RCMP have not said whether they've identified a suspect. To Langley now, where an explosion destroyed a small building yesterday, and a homicide investigation is now underway there as well. Our Liam Britton has more on the blast itself and what police found afterwards.
We heard this huge bang that it shook our house.
Rowena Dahlman and her husband were watching the news when the blast echoed through their South Langley neighborhood just after 2 p.m. Sunday. A small outbuilding about a kilometer away on 8th Avenue off to 40th was destroyed. Police say once firefighters put out the flames, they found human remains.
At this time, we're unable to say whether the person was deceased as a result of the explosion or if they were already deceased beforehand.
All along 8th Avenue, neighbors say doors and siding were wrecked by the blast. Next door to the explosion, workers have 9 windows to patch up. While just across this fence, chunks of metal, which homeowners say came from the destroyed outbuilding. This is the front of the property where the explosion happened. The outbuilding, however, that's further in, but police have kept us out. You can see that crews have been here all day. Police are looking for any kind of dash camera or surveillance camera footage from noon to 2:30 p.m. Sunday from this neighborhood. And they say they don't know yet if the victim lived on this property. Liam Britton, CBC News, Langley.
Well, students from an elementary school that burned to the ground in Port Coquitlam returned to class in a new location today. Some 300 Hazel Trembath Elementary School students are now being bused to Winslow Centre in nearby Coquitlam. It's a former high school and a district facility. Port Coquitlam's mayor says teachers have spent the past week preparing the new site, but admits it is only a temporary fix.
From my perspective, I want to see the school rebuilt, and I want to see it rebuilt as quickly as possible. And that's why in Port Coquitlam, we directed our staff to prioritize any application that comes to rebuild the school, and also to waive all the applicable city fees with rebuilding the school.
Hazel Trembath was destroyed 10 days ago in what's being called a suspicious fire. The mayor says police are reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance footage. Well, from architects to music teachers, veterinarians to social workers, the province says it wants to get more internationally trained professionals working in BC. As Emily Vance reports, the province is rolling out legislation to help cut red tape for dozens of professions.
We have 1 million plus jobs that will be opening in the next decade in this province.
Premier David Eby says the need for internationally trained professionals is growing.
And we know that we will not be successful in filling those jobs unless at least a third of them are filled by newcomers to British Columbia.
But right now, the process for getting foreign work credentials recognized can be lengthy and expensive. Groups that help newcomers in Canada say they hear many sad stories.
People are forced to make decisions of leaving the profession that they spent years in their home countries getting trained for and even working in those professions.
The International Credentials Recognition Act hopes to change that.
There are too many unnecessary barriers for internationally trained professionals across the board that need to be removed.
Mercier says the new act will remove what they call a catch-22, the need to have Canadian work experience before being accredited to work in BC. The act would also reduce what the province calls repetitive English language tests, set a limit on the amount of time it takes to get accredited, and require all information about each process be posted online. Alice Wong is a social worker trained in Hong Kong and living in Vancouver, and admits it was tough to get certified here in BC.
I was lucky that I have come through all the obstacles, that I'm going to start my first ever social worker job here.
Some business groups say they are cautiously optimistic.
Really, the proof is going to be in the results and how all of this new legislation, when it is approved by the BC government, is going to work in coordination with Canadian immigration policies.
If passed, the act would create a new superintendent to help coordinate with various regulatory bodies. The changes would take effect next summer. Emily Vance, CBC News, Victoria.
From the South Coast and beyond, bike lanes have long been a divisive issue, and oftentimes it leads to drawn-out debates that can grind on in City Council for years. But as our Justin McElroy explains, one BC city decided on a unique solution to solve that.
Penticton. It has a giant peach, a giant welcome sign, and a giant ban at City Hall from work on one specific topic.
Bike lanes have not been good for our community.
They've had enough of separated bike lanes.
I don't want to get into the merits of bike lanes, to be honest.
That's right. Last week, Council voted to direct staff to stop all work on any separated bike lanes for the rest of their term in power.
It sounded like we were talking about bike lanes, but we weren't talking about bike lanes, but we're talking about bike lanes and how we shouldn't be talking about bike lanes going forward for another few years.
It comes 3 years after Council approved the first major separated bike lane right through the heart of the city. Now, as with most things new, it has divided the town, and a councillor said the conversation has gotten a little over the top.
Obviously, the bike lanes are an unnecessarily emotional issue with a lot of people.
But he voted for the ban. So did 3 others, much to the chagrin of the mayor.
We should leave our options open for discussing projects in their entirety in the future. And that is our job.
Now, of course, there's nothing stopping this council from switching its mind in the future about talking about bike lanes. And while no discussion of any lanes might seem harsh, consider that Vancouver has had 5 votes in the last 3 years over a single bike lane, with no solution in sight. It's another example of how installing bike lanes anywhere in BC continues to be a bumpy road. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
After the break, we take you to the Middle East, where Hamas has released 2 hostages in Gaza, including a woman with Vancouver ties. We hear from her family next. Stay with us. And thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. In Saskatchewan, today was the first day of school since the provincial government there passed its new Parents' Bill of Rights. Now, if a student asks a teacher to use a different gender-related name, the teacher must first receive permission from a parent or guardian. The CBC's Pretush Dayal has more.
With the new law now in effect, school feels less safe to Silas Kane.
I am so hated for just existing and being who I am.
The 15-year-old came out as transgender 5 years ago to a teacher before he told his mother. She's sad other children won't have that opportunity.
I moved to Canada in 2007 from the UK, and this isn't what I thought I was moving to. I mean, this is really awful, scary.
Jessica Fraser and Meadow McLean both have transgender children in the school system.
There were several gender diverse kids, and the teachers were amazing.
They're upset by the new law, but feel confident some teachers will still find creative ways to support children. They just worry it won't be enough.
Supported in research that having one safe adult that you can discuss these things with saves lives and prevents suicide attempts and death by suicide. And so the fact that we're potentially taking that away is just an atrocity, really.
I'm going to quote Mr. Rogers, let's look for the helpers.
Dr. Sarah Dungewell is a Saskatoon psychiatrist. She says the public backlash to the law has been encouraging and that mental health professionals, when given the opportunity, will still support children.
We have not been in a well enough funded mental health support system in years, so we are all quite experienced with trying to make the best of a challenging situation. We're going to keep working on that.
Other mental health supports, well, we know there's not enough of that kind of thing in schools, just because the funding just isn't there. So, that's really not a realistic option.
How many more trans kids have to die before they realize that this isn't okay?
Pratish Dayal, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Gaza. It says the two women are elderly and come from a kibbutz in southern Israel that was attacked by Hamas earlier this month. The CBC's Susan Ormiston is there with more.
Families flee in Gaza City after a bombardment demolishes a neighbor's house, they say, as the Israeli military intensify their airstrikes. Some of the most severe of this war. More than 300 strikes in 24 hours. Hamas-controlled health authorities say casualties are rapidly rising, over 5,000 killed in the war, including thousands of children. But the exact number is hard to verify. The last 24 hours was particularly deadly, it says, and pressure is growing internationally for a pause in this war.
It's very dire, and the only thing that we can do is to ask for a humanitarian pause and to increase the access of the humanitarian support.
But so far, no ceasefire. The Israeli military is zeroing in on Hamas operations, pounding targets to neuter threats, it says, before troops advance on the ground into Gaza. We spoke to Bilal Jad Allah in Gaza City. Do you believe that there will be an Israeli ground incursion very soon?
For us here, or for Gaza people here, it's now safe.
because what he's doing from the sky is too much. He destroyed everything. So what is the need for the ground care? He destroyed everything in Gaza.
A third convoy of trucks carrying supplies got through to Gaza via the Rafah crossing in Egypt. Critical supplies of food and medicine, but no fuel needed to distribute those supplies, to desalinate the water, and critically to run hospital generators.
Without fuel, we are going to sadly be forced to stop our humanitarian operation in a couple of days on Wednesday night. So we really urge those who can help us to facilitate the delivery, an urgent delivery of fuel into the Gaza Strip.
Gaza is bracing for another deadly night, but tonight, 2 more hostages, both Israeli women, were freed by the militant group Hamas, it says for humanitarian reasons and because of poor health. But that leaves 220 other hostages still captive inside Gaza and will only ratchet up the pressure on Israeli and other governments to get them all out before an expected ground offensive. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, she is Israeli. One of those hostages released has Canadian ties, including a niece here in Vancouver. Our Adrienne Arsenault spoke with her about the moment she found out her aunt was finally free.
Ruti Mizrahi, you know, we have so little good news to talk about sometimes that it's a pleasure to talk with you tonight about your aunt. And I'm curious, what's the first indication you got that she was about to be freed?
I start getting messages suddenly, you know, and then I got a phone call from my ex-husband, and he said, "Did you hear the news?" And I'm like, "No." I couldn't believe it in the beginning, you know.
I can't imagine what went through you in that moment.
I'm not sure myself. It's like, it's such a relief and happiness, but then I don't really believe, you know. And you know, there's so many other people that are still missing and kidnapped. That it's a mixed emotion, but very happy and relieved to see her back.
And of course, in terms of so many other people, your uncle is still being held. Do you know anything about how he is?
No, and what I heard is that they were actually separated, so they weren't together. So if that is the case, we won't probably even have anything new that we can learn from my aunt.
That's really hard. From talking to family and looking at the pictures, what's your sense of how your aunt is, or how she fared, or why they released her?
I don't really know why they released her. She looks good. Like, one of my thought was maybe because the women that they released so far, they all looked physically good, you know. So I guess the Hamas wants to show that, you know, they are very humanitarian. But other than this, I don't know.
Well, you're going to have a great chat with your aunt at one point. One last thought. How have you managed in the last 2 weeks?
You know, I had my ups and downs. It's like a roller coaster of emotions. I was really, you know, sad, mostly worried, also anger, you know, with everything that happened there. But I had to keep hope, you know, I had to keep positive and believe that they will come back hopefully soon.
Ruti, we really appreciate you taking time for us, and we hope the best for you and the whole family.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is in the United Arab Emirates today to discuss the war. One issue is what happens if the situation in Lebanon deteriorates. Melanie Joly urges thousands of Canadians living there to get out.
First and foremost, my message to Canadians in Lebanon is, first, you need to come home. This is time to leave. And I've been saying that for many days. Meanwhile, there is work that is being done by Global Affairs Canada, by also the Canadian Armed Forces, I've been in contact with my counterpart from Cyprus this morning, but my message is the same. There are still commercial options available. Canadians should get out.
In the meantime, the last planned Canadian evacuation flight left Israel today. Well, cities and towns across Canada are under pressure to change their bylaws to allow for more housing. $4 billion is up for grabs through the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. Ottawa is calling on communities to be ambitious in their pitches. But as Marina von Stackelberg reports, some cities want more flexibility.
Canada's Housing Minister, Sean Fraser, with a message for municipalities. If you want federal money to help you build more homes, get ambitious or get left behind.
We are looking for the best of the best. We are looking for the most ambitious applications.
Ottawa has received some 540 applications, but Fraser is suggesting cities alter their proposals to increase their chances of scoring the funds. He says municipalities should offer up their own land for development, speed up building permits, and loosen restrictions on the parking and land they require for housing.
If there's a message for communities that are partway through the process today, if you see your neighbor stepping up their ambition and getting a successful agreement with the federal government, know that that's who you're competing against.
Ottawa also wants cities to change zoning bylaws, so land designated for a single house can be used for multiple units. That's something Mississauga, Ontario recently voted to do.
I have no direction from my residents as to whether or not I should be voting in favor of fourplexes as of right.
But some councillors who voted against that worry in the rush to rezone and access the money, they haven't studied the impact on public services.
For the federal government to impose its housing standards on municipalities across this country and then just dangle a little bit of funding in front of us to get us to significantly overhaul our zoning bylaws in our cities, I think is very disingenuous by the federal government.
Other cities have a plan, but think Ottawa needs to be more flexible with its demands.
When the minister asked for 4 units per property, we just don't see that fits for Charlottetown because one method or one idea is not applicable to all. So as an historic city, we have to keep that historic look.
I don't want to see the historic buildings in Charlottetown knocked over for small apartments, of course.
The federal government has reached funding deals with Halifax and several Ontario cities, including Hamilton, London, Vaughan, and Brampton. And in the coming few weeks, Ottawa plans to look at the applications from smaller municipalities and rural communities. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Here's a live shot of Harbour Centre right now. Well, the rain held off again today, but it is about to make a return, and colder temperatures are on the way as well. Your 5-day forecast is next.
Mom in my room with me right now, so it's a little difficult to be organized and her newborn baby. So I'm trying to conduct business in this setting.
When Leanne Stewart came to Grace Hospital in labor at 3 in the morning, this was the only space the hospital could find for her. So her daughter was born in this office.
It didn't make any difference at 3 o'clock this morning, but it is inconvenient now.
So now you're getting your own room?
Yeah.
This is not the first time mothers have given birth in Mary Shaw's Public Relations Office, and it likely won't be the last. The number of babies being born at the Grace is growing. It's the busiest maternity hospital in Canada. And in the middle of this boom, more women in their mid to late 30s are having babies that are considered high risk and need special attention. That's causing a crunch, a dangerous crunch.
It has the potential to become unsafe. It has the potential for accidents to happen.
There was one point early this year where we had to ask the patients approximately 9 or 10 in the morning that were going home later in the day to get dressed and wait in the lounge areas so that we could transfer the patients from the post-anesthetic room in order to commence our surgical slate. Yes.
And that is not good.
Very dangerous obstetrical practice.
According to National Hospital safety standards, Grace should only handle 6,700 births a year. This year, 8,500 babies will be born here. Doctors have tried different ways to ease the load, such as discharging women a day earlier than they used to, or asking low-risk women to go elsewhere. But the numbers continue to climb.
There's no more flesh on the bones to tinker with, I think, is our problem. So we have to really reduce the numbers somehow.
Doctors say part of the problem is that the Grace is a victim of its own success. Pregnant women like it here. They don't want to go to other hospitals. But that may have to change. As one doctor said, an overcrowded hospital is an emergency waiting to happen. Catherine Clark, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Our Darius Madavi joins us with a look at the forecast. Darius, we managed to stay mainly dry through many parts this weekend, but it sounds like it's about to get really cold.
Cold and wet just for tomorrow. So the rain is short-lived, but the cold is here to stay for at least a while. So this is where we'd normally be this time of year, just dipping into the negatives in the northwest. Everywhere else staying above, even here in the south, above 10 degrees. That's not what we're seeing. So this is actually the normals going back to 1940. So even it would be even warmer than this if we were just looking at what Environment Canada usually shows, which is the last 30 years. But well below even that. So we're looking at temperatures 10 to 15 degrees below where we'd usually be this time of year throughout the north, and that's going to continue spreading through the south over the next couple days, meaning we're looking extremely chilly across the board. Even here on the coast, we're getting down into the mid-single digits. So very chilly. Kelowna almost hitting 0. We're looking cold, and that's if we look at the highs. The lows, even worse. We're looking absolutely frigid in the north and in the south. That's going to only spread, hitting the negatives through most of the southern interior. So expect some chilly days and especially chilly nights ahead, and it's also going to be coming with quite a bit of snow. So we do have some weather watches in place across parts of the province as a result of just how much snow we're going to be getting. A lot of the mountain passes up to 20 centimeters of snow. We're also going to be seeing some rain here on the coast, so that's all going to be coming tomorrow. You can see here that accumulation. That's all one system that's going to be passing through and should be gone by the end of the day or overnight tomorrow, really. So that's really all the rain we're expecting. Other than that, just expect the cold. Well, the sun will be out over the next few days here in Vancouver, but lots of rain and potentially even flurries throughout the southern interior as that system does push through. So expect some chilly and wet nights ahead in the southern interior. Even here on the North Shore Mountains, as we get that rain, we're also expecting some snow to build up on the peaks. So be ready for that. Now, tomorrow we get that rain, and then, as I said, just clearing up for some sunny but cold days ahead.
Barely into fall, and already it's feeling like winter. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thanks, Tanya.
That is your late news for this Monday, October 23rd. For news anytime, anywhere, you can download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.